Hi, everybody, and welcome to What with Rep Bass. That's Well, How About That? And welcome to our first episode of 2021. I'm lucky and I'm very happy to have my first guest of 2021, a longtime friend and colleague in government, somebody that, to me, knows more about politics inside and out, not just in the local venue, but all across our nation. So it's my pleasure to have my friend Tony Cignoli join us today. Hi, Tony. How are you?
Excellent, Representative. Thanks so much for having me on. This is great.
Well, I really appreciate that. Tony, I've known you for a long time, and I'm sure some people who end up watching this will have seen you on some of our local news stations giving your opinion or what's going on in a particular election. Can you tell people a little bit more about what you do and where you work and the kind of things you and your team do?
Absolutely. So I think I'm pretty much an old school political consultant. We still help advise political campaigns. My role usually is, I kind of liken it to Eisenhower in a campaign. I'm pretty much the chief general, and there's other great generals that get involved with us. We tend to try to go out and find the Patton and the MacArthur that we need to win a political campaign. But it's the same approach that we bring to our corporate clients as well. I had the good benefit a long time ago, Representative, to sit down with Joe Napolitan, arguably one of the best.
I was going to bring up his name after, so we'll talk about him a little bit, but go ahead.
I appreciate that. You know, I had a friend of your dad's, Joe Napolitan.
Yeah.
I actually remember being at Joe's house once with your father and a few others. And it occurred to me at that time, don't say anything, just listen, because you're in a room filled with greatness, you know? But Joe arguably was one of the first full-service, holistic political consultants. First political consultant of the modern television age as well, too. When you look at the kind of clients that he had, Kennedy, etc. But he, at one point, gave me some really good advice. Tony, the political stuff is great and it's fun, and you've done it in a lot of places at this point. Get corporate clients, because corporate clients, they're going to pay you whether you win or you lose.
Yeah.
You know? And there's a lot that we can bring to our different clients, whether it's a large social service organization or a large corporate client, manufacturing to a hospital, where we can apply political campaign metrics to help them to get the things that they need done. So it's pretty good. Every day is something really different.
Yeah.
You never know. On a given
It's got to be good with corporate. You don't have to chase them as much. With politics, it's every 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, you got to find your candidates or hope they're coming to you.
You know, that is a great point. With political campaigns, it's cyclical. Every 2, every 4, every 6 years, depending on the campaign or the office. And in this particular case, that can be short term, certainly with the political candidates. But with the corporate, it's usually a longer view. It's what are we looking to accomplish in the next decade to compete with our clients and our competition in China or elsewhere. Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate the work you've done. And just going back to Joe Napolitan for a second, when I first decided to run, before unfortunately he passed away, I had a chance to sit down and just talk about my political career, and I was just so appreciative, just to think, all right, I'm getting to sit with this guy who's been through so much, and it was great just to sit there. And again, I didn't say a word either. I just listened because he was such a wealth of information. But Tony, no slight on you either. I mean, you like, I remember when I first, heard you, I'm like, wow, I don't know what Tony Cignoli knows or doesn't know. And the more I watched you and the more I got involved in politics, I realized what a grasp and what a depth of knowledge you have. And it shows. Like, I love when we go to our dinners at the, for the credit union.
Yes.
And
oh, yeah.
You, without notes, and I always appreciate somebody who can get up there without notes and speak not only about what you're talking about, but you'll point out whatever elected officials are there, and you have something to say about each one of them, which to me just shows that you get the big picture and you understand who individuals are and how they impact a general area and working together. So I appreciate and have appreciated a long time what you do.
Thank you.
You make it look easy.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Rep.
And I'm sincere too. I want to talk a little bit, just like, what do you think about our political landscape around here over the last 20 years or so? I grew up in Springfield, as you know, and been in Long Meadow for 27 years, and I've seen it change dramatically from town to town and even the region. I just wondered some of your takes on what's going on. It's just in our area.
Sure. I'll tell you, my view of that too is long, because I've been involved since I was a teenager as a member of the Pine Point Citizens Council initially, and learning how really local all politics really is from that community involvement at that time, running a race for a state representative for Paul Karen when I think it was 17 or 18 years old, maybe 18 or 19 years old now that I think about it. And then going to the State House at a unique time during a lot of change, in leadership, when George Kavarian challenged the House Speaker, and that was history. But back here to the local, to see the passing of time of significant players, titans in the legislature, the Mullinses of the world, the Iris Hollands, the Tony Schiavellis, Mike Walsh, the Paul Karens of the world, these major leaders, Malconian. And what I've seen happen is, from those lions of the legislature at that time, we now find ourselves with members of the House and the Senate that, in the same vein, carry on in the same way as a cohesive unit, but fighting for Western Massachusetts, as a bloc, as a group. As right now, as we're taping this, a lot of folks have seen the benefit of that when you and your colleagues have been fighting and making a very loud noise, I might add, to the benefit of the folks of all of Western Mass, not just your own district, but to see you joining with a Senator Lesser and the legislators north of Cignoli to say, hey, don't forget us on vaccine, the distribution centers, Governor.
Absolutely.
The noise on that. I've seen that, not, how do I say it? The names have changed, and the names now are more representative of some of the individual districts. The legislators look like their districts,
Absolutely.
Wow. Carlos Gonzalez, Jose Posada, who exits, Orlando Ramos,
was
who
great.
comes in. And to see these very aggressive legislators representing their district, and I don't want to say this to pander to you, but I look at the geographic size of your district, and I know you heard this from some of your colleagues in Boston. They look at the size of your district and it'd be fuddled. How could that be possible? Because they have tiny areas.
Exactly.
There's so many people packed into those areas in Greater Boston. And just when you look at the kind of running around that an Adam Hines has to do, that a Lesser has to do with such large districts.
Representative Pignatelli up in the Berks,
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, Senator Vila, forgive me, Senator, I said Representative, but Senator Vilas's district, I mean, my gosh, from the hill towns to East Hampton, to Holyoke in Westfield, it's just so diverse. But that's one thing that we've seen change. The legislators look more like their districts. On the local aspect of things, certainly too, I think we've seen something else. We've seen electorates that have gotten a little bit more sophisticated. Back in the day, it was, mail and knock on the door once or twice. Now it's social media campaigns that are a necessity, and folks having a lot more access to information. They still need the traditional media to have an idea what's going on. And thank goodness we've still got that in a big way. Our local television, our local print, you look at the expansion of the Republican into the Reminder, all these additions throughout Massachusetts, in addition to El Pueblo Latino, in addition to picking up the Westfield News. That's important. That's powerful. So forgive me for the ramble on that. What I'm seeing right now.
No, it's good stuff.
We've kind of gone from having to rely on the major domo political activists who inform thousands of people of what's going on in a particular area, to folks on their own being able to plug in, tune in, and weigh in.
Yeah. And I think you're right about, around here, we're lucky we have a diverse Western Mass coalition, especially the Greater Springfield, and it does represent the areas that they serve, and I think it's good. And I also appreciate that it's good to work with. I'm in my 13th year, but our delegation has continued, even though the pieces have changed, we continue to work together, because even though we might have differences of opinion on some political issues, we all realize that we need to work together for the betterment of Western Mass and betterment of our area. And, and I'm proud that, people have, and we have, as you know, not a lot of new legislators over the last couple terms as well. We've lost some people that have been in there a long time, and I think Joe Wagner's probably the dean of, the Western Mass delegation now.
Yeah, absolutely. Often at events and whatnot, especially in his district or for the Greater Springfield affiliated chamber or the ERC5 or the West of the River crowd, if Chairman Wagner is in the room, I usually introduce him, with great respect as the Speaker of the House of Western Massachusetts, because he really is that player, And one of the things I think about that is he's been there a long time, but his continued evolution. He constantly is keeping up with what's happening, what's going on.
Yeah.
There's a common sense approach. And I think it's something that we benefit from in Western Massachusetts, that the members here, whether they be liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican, there's that cohesive thing that you just mentioned, fighting for Western Massachusetts, but also there seems to be a heck of a lot more common sense. Maybe it's the case that we're west of Worcester, west of Boston, and you've got to have that. But there's just a real more common person touch, and you see it reflected in the legislation that you all file. So often together signing on to each other's legislation.
Absolutely. And I appreciate, sometimes people will call for term limits, and I look at like the House and it turns over so rapidly. Yeah. And I think it's important to have a Joe Wagner, people that have had some time in, because when you look around our area now, we have a lot of new reps and senators. Yeah. And if you don't have those people that have not only the institutional knowledge, but the knowledge of legislation and what's going on in the area to work from, I think you really need a combination of the new voices and some that have been around for a while. And I'm not saying this because I've been in there a little while, I'm trying to preserve, but I mean, I always think you do need a good mix of both.
Yeah, totally agree on that for another reason too. That's exactly well said. And even as with just the political consultant hat on, more so than the business development and the aspect of our offices and whatnot, that continuity is important for us in Western Mass with someone like a Wagner, someone like yourself, because when we look at the leadership in Boston, these are folks that have been around for a while. The outgoing speaker, Bob DeLeo, had a real feel for Western Mass. Who did he get that feel from? He got it from Wagner, that relationship. But he also got, and again, not to pander to you, I know the relationship that he had with you. I know the relationship that he would have with Carlos Gonzalez. Can you imagine? DeLeo, when Gonzalez was first elected, saying, I will come to your district because it's important to the people in your district to see for the first time a Latinx of the House elected. I will come and swear you in your district. Wow,
And it was, and he's gone to fundraisers for everybody, but he spent his time out here for sure. And as a Western Mass legislator, you appreciate that when somebody from Boston area comes out here, because then they get a better snapshot of really what's going on out here. Because it is, there's some things are similar, but some things are much different out here than in Central, Western, or the North or South Shore.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to kind of joke around with him a little bit just before he exited, Speaker DeLeo. And at this time, even last year, an annual breakfast that a group would get together for, and I would always weigh in for Western Mass. I would look around the room. We could still all get together, this group of consultants and others and whatnot, in Boston at an early January event for the Speaker of the House. And I would weigh in for Western Mass and joke around that I would be the person that would have come the farthest for this event in Boston, Right. And he would always take the time to talk about Western Mass issues. What stunned me is he really knew about Western Mass issues. And he would say, yeah, well, Ash told me this, and, Gus, Sasato told me that, and I got this from Pupolo. So,
and he did pay attention.
Yeah, he really did. Yeah. And I'm hoping that, like, when a president of the United States leaves, they leave that little letter in the middle of the desk drawer and whatnot for the incoming president. I kind of hope that he imparted that on Speaker Mariano as well. I think that probably, hopefully, will be the case.
And I know they're pretty close, so I would think he would have done that too.
Yeah,
I just want to talk a little bit more about the area here. Kind of like, what kind of impact do you think COVID had on our local elections? And you can even expand it to like an MGM, our businesses, Bay State. Sure. Two of our bigger downtown staples, and then we'll transfer into that and talk about one of the races that I think was a surprise, at least to me, and I don't know if you saw it or didn't, with Senator Jim Welch losing to now Senator Adam Gomez. Yeah. And what a difference it makes when you talked before about my district being very, a big district. I have 4 towns, and in my district, each community is completely different from the next, as is their senatorial district. So maybe we can start with that, and then we'll talk more about COVID and the business and the other elections. So what do you think happened with, Jim Welch, good friend of mine. I like
Yeah.
Adam Gomez as well. But I was surprised. Jim won 3 of his areas, but lost Springfield heavily.
Interesting. It goes back to an earlier question, the change. To see the electorate in Springfield change. You know, arguably Springfield is a largely Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, base right now. And for a long time, we saw that more and more folks from the community were starting to get engaged in politics. And again, I date myself, but I go back to the days of the late Miguel Vivas, to Anna Andino, who's still there now, fighting the fights in the North End, God bless her, to Carmen Rosa and others that we were involved in the day. I mean, they got the ball rolling, along with others, like Juan Harena, et cetera, Tommy Hidalgo, and it just kept snowballing and getting larger. And what we saw is a younger group of Hispanic, Latino, Latinx base become more involved. And pointedly, I would say this. If we were giving advice to anyone in that Senate race, and we were involved in that one, we had an awful lot going on around the country, we would have said too often when folks look at Springfield and looking for that Latinx base, that they just assume sometimes that they're from outside of Springfield. We're talking North End. And certainly that was a massive base for Adam Gomez, not just because he was the city councilor of Ward 1, but who his father is,
Right.
This man's paid his dues for 50, 60 years.
Right. Well respected throughout the community.
One of the things that a lot of people don't know about Adam's dad is not just the hero who Vietnam veterans were Puerto Rican and what he's done for Vietnam vets all these years, not just what he's done in the New North, but the other thing about him, he's one of the major people who fought for ward representation in the city of Springfield. That's Adam's dad. And what else do we say? Too often, folks, again, are thinking that community is just Ward 1. It's all 8 wards of the city of Springfield. And Adam commanded that. I saw people come from Senator Lesser's district into his district to help him, with sign holding, standouts, that type of thing and whatnot. But it was a good campaign in that Adam left no stone unturned. I live in Springfield on the edge of Westfield. And I think we saw Adam Gomez, even despite COVID, this guy was hitting the street. And we had several, not even mailings. I don't know if they were lit drops, as I'm thinking about it right now, where you're leaving but specific issues where I live, where I am, my street's 1.1 miles long. Every house has 1, 2, 6 or 7 registered voters in it. Everybody on the street votes,
Right.
And the key issue for us is Route 20, which is a state issue that folks here had appealed for a long time to the Commonwealth on. We need some relief, given the kind of traffic accidents, et cetera, and the things that go on there. Adam was responsive to that. So I don't mean to go long on it. It just seemed like he had advisors who were able to say to him, it's a big, broad campaign because it's such a large Senate race, but everything is local. What's local?
Absolutely. And he got the Hispanic as well as others. I mean, there was a big turnout regardless with COVID. And he got the Hispanic vote out, which probably surprised how many people he got out, which was fantastic. That really is what elections are all about. You want, at the end of the day, you want as many people to vote as possible. So you're getting a fair representation of who the people really want. Too often you get a low turnout in some areas, and you really don't know if that's an accurate description. But I was surprised by that. Well, surprised, but when I saw what he did, it made sense as well.
It really was a well-run campaign, and he had some significant endorsements too. To get folks like Jesse Letterman, so popular in the city of Springfield, to give you an endorsement. And Letterman goes beyond the city because of some of the issues that he's become known for fighting on, environmental issues, et cetera. He's got a base outside. He's got friends in West Springfield and in parts of Chicopee that were part of the Senate district as well. So really a well-done campaign by Gomez. And goodness gracious too, when you look at Senator Welch, especially the work he did as the chair of the healthcare committee when he was in the Senate, that was so important for Springfield because of Bay State, because of Trinity. And he was at the helm of a lot of key issues. I'll say this too. Sometimes those are the kind of issues, Representative. It's just not that sexy. It's not.
You're right.
It's
It's necessary, but it's not the headline catching.
Honest to gosh, some of the thing exactly. So well said. So very well said.
But I appreciate stuff like that because you're doing it for the betterment of your community, not for the betterment of yourself, which at the end of the day, obviously you have to promote yourself, but you want to get things done for the communities you serve. So I thought that was interesting. What else, what other kind of impacts do you think COVID's had on like Springfield area with MGM and Bay State? I mean, kind of like both got hit totally different ways, but impacted nonetheless.
Absolutely so. I mean, we can see that the obvious with MGM is that you just don't have folks coming in en masse. You know, a few of us were talking about it from the business community in the last week or so. This is probably, I want to say it carefully, but we're hopeful that given that the Eastfield Mall is doing what they're doing and the state is doing what they're doing at the Eastfield Mall for COVID vaccine, on top of the fact that the mall's ownership had opened the place up for, you know, COVID testing for months and months, right? We're actually hoping that all these people coming to Springfield, I know I hope I'm going to say this the right way and not take light of it. COVID is a terrible thing, but maybe if there's something good that comes out of it, this almost becomes like a tourist attraction. It's bringing people in from all over, 15,000 people a day to the Eastfield Mall area. Also showing folks that, again, one of those not sexy, not sensational, hard work things. When Dominic Sarno became mayor of Springfield, he brought in a new DPW chief. I should recuse myself. His last name is Cignoli. We're distant. These guys did the hard work of figuring out the traffic signalization in that neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Did the hard work of getting the neighborhoods to buy into it. Guy did the hard work also of repairing what had not been working well for the 20 years before of attempts. Long story short, you're able to get in and out of that part of Springfield so easily because of the hard work of the traffic signals. And where did that money come from? The legislators 20 years ago who brought.
And you're right. Those aren't the sexy things that get the headlines, but they are so important to everything that we do day in and day out. Why don't we shift a little bit to state? We'll start off. What did you think about the Senator Markey and Congressman Kennedy's race, which obviously, as you know, Congressman Kennedy came out, surprised a lot of people that he was going to run, and his poll numbers were, way up, where he was way ahead of Senator Markey. But I always look at those things, I'd rather be ahead at the end than at the beginning. And it was so true. You just saw it slowly diminish and Senator Markey picking up more and more momentum as it went on. What do you think of all that? And do you think COVID had any impact on the race, or do you think it would have played out the same way?
I think both candidates did a phenomenal job getting around the challenges of COVID. But talk about a comeback campaign. Talk about a great comeback. Probably one of the greatest comebacks in Massachusetts history was Ed Markey, because as you just said, very on target and remembering the beginning of this race, Ed Markey was arguably down 24 to 28 points. One poll even had him down 32 right at the outset. My gosh, he's going to get killed.
That's big.
We all saw the stories, different folks, after the election was over, more and more comes out. People went to Ed Markey, went to the senator to say, please don't run, don't embarrass yourself. You can't do this. You're of a different time and a different age. He made the brilliant move of having John Walsh as his campaign person, his campaign manager. But then Ed Markey himself, I would say he did not reinvent himself. He just reintroduced himself. It dawned on everybody, hey, wait a second. This guy's story, where he's stood on so many issues, this will play in Peoria right now with COVID, with a much younger base who doesn't even know who he is. He really did a great job reintroducing himself. And talk about a comeback of extraordinary proportions. I had an opportunity to be involved with a Suffolk University symposium. Our friend, former Senator Linda Melkonian, was one of the people that put this together. We had Mike Dukakis on with us. We had John Paleologos, who had done the polling in that campaign, who's known nationally and polls for Suffolk. And that was one of the things we were saying. And to have no less than a Michael Dukakis, talk about the comeback kid. Remember, they got knocked out as governor, came back in 1982 with an improbable campaign. And Dukakis did the same thing. It doesn't happen that often. You don't get big second acts in politics. Markey dotted every I, crossed every T. If people don't know what you've done, then you haven't done it. We say that to all our clients. Or political. And Markey did a good job saying, here's what I've done for the last 30 or 40 years, and maybe you didn't know about it, and here's what I'm going to do going forward. So quite a campaign. What also surprised me were the ground troops for Markey.
Oh, hit a lot of young people too.
Yeah, a lot of young people, stunning amount of young people. And the endorsements as well to get a lot of folks, especially like, well, an example, Joe Comerford endorsed him. Early on, folks thought that perhaps someone like Joe might have gone with, the perceivably more liberal Joe Kennedy. I think she took a look at it and said, wait a second, this is Ed Markey isn't Ted Kennedy, but he certainly is a lion of the legislature, and we're going to stay the course.
Yeah, he did. He had a good deal of the legislature with him, and I was actually surprised too that more weren't with Kennedy. And I was also impressed with his energy and his exuberance.
Stunning.
I mean, he came in, I feel embarrassed. I'm like, boy, this guy's got more energy than I ever had. But
absolutely,
he got into it, and I think that helps as well, because it shows that you really care about what you're doing and you're into. You're not just going through the motions, trying to get reelected.
Every socially distanced event Markey showed up at, whether it was getting out of a car or jumping off of his bus, the guy ran. He jumped off. He had those sneakers from 1989. That was kind of cool.
I know.
Sneakers that long, Who resold sneakers?
Well, I think Markey, they were pro kids.
It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And so, you get kudos for that kind of thing. He's frugal. He's a character and all of that. But the energy level was really shocking, and they dotted every single line. They did not leave a single inch of earth to Kennedy. Right. They went at Kennedy where he was strong, and they, at the same time, doubled down where Markey was powerful as well too. That great line from Sun Tzu: attack your opponent, where he's weakest, and attack him and defend where you're strongest.
Yeah, and Markey was great, and I'll give credit to Markey too. He has, and he still does, spends a lot of time in Western Mass. I think 2 days before the election, he had a little rally in Long Meadow, which I said, wow, no state campaign comes to Western Mass or Long Meadow a couple days before the election. So that speaks to who he is.
Yeah, well said. The other thing, just quickly too, the constituent work, a quiet, you need someone who's going to do a level of real constituent work in the communities, like Long Meadow, like Munson, like Wales, like Brimfield. And he had developed a reputation for that. You knew who his legislative aides were. And when you coupled the work on occasion of those aides with Congressman Neal's office, wow, that was good. Certainly Senator Warren, an amazing member of the United States Senate, but perhaps more of a national player, international player, whereas Markey, a lot of attention to the average regular folks in those cities and towns. My goodness gracious, in the Berkshires, revered for what he was able to do on Wi-Fi and issues with cable, etc. Taking on Comcast, taking on Spectrum and the others. Those are usually the kind of issues that are more local and parochial. Here, a United States Senator got involved in those things.
Local, that's a tough one to say. Local and parochial.
Yeah.
Switch real quick. Well, Congressman Neal, Alex Morse race. Any surprises there for you?
Not really. No.
I wasn't. I thought Congressman Neal would win a lot, but I know a lot of people thought, Mayor Morse would, or at least do much better.
Often what happens is that even for someone like Congressman Neal, Chairman Neal, who spends so much time in his district, he's noted for showing up on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even when they're in session and going back and forth. Even during COVID, he's always been around. He's always been the local guy. Whether you see him at a local wake or the presenting of a wreath at a veterans event, etc. Around local, that helps. The other piece of it, though, Neal made the case very much like Markey. Here's what I've done. Here's what I've brought back home. And then the other case, I'm the chairman of Ways and Means. It was wise that though a lot of Neal's messaging and TV was really more common person connection on issues like social security, COVID, etc. And he made it very clear here in a couple of his ads and in some of his mailings, this is what it means to you, that I'm the chairman of Ways and Means. Here's what I've been able to do. Here's what I'm going to be able to do. It made very little sense for the average regular person who doesn't eat, drink, and sleep politics the way that some of us do, 24 hours, to change from that power base at a time like this, so the time that we're confronted with the challenges that we are from COVID.
You're right. And when I looked at that, I told people, I said, even if they didn't care for Congressman Neal, I said, in your lifetime, we will never have the chairman of Ways and Means in Congress again when Congressman Neal leaves. It's such a tough thing to get. And I saw, as you know, in Massachusetts, happen with Jeff Sanchez when he was a chairman. He got beat on one issue, and I don't think his constituents, and I don't know how he played out his election, but they voted against him on one issue, but they didn't realize how much good he could have done being the chairman of Ways and Means. Again, in that district, we'll probably never see that again for a long time.
Interesting. We're saying this to a lot of clients right now. We use Neal and we use Markey as examples of no matter how big you are, how entrenched you may be, whatever you've accomplished in Washington, it's got to translate to folks back here as to what you're doing for them. How are you benefiting their child, their grandchild, their pocketbook, their wallet?
Right.
And we're using both of those campaigns as examples of here's how you do that, how you speak plainly, how you make that case. Yeah. It's a necessity. The other thing too is that, gosh, golly gee whiz, sometimes when you're in office for a long time, a little fatigue can kick in, you know?
Absolutely.
And especially that's the kind of thing that those who have been in a seat for a long time have to take into account and realize that that's where they've got to constantly have contact with their electorate.
Right. And they have to roll with the times, you know, some of them, you know, Twitter, Facebook, things that have come up over the last 20 years and have become an integral part of campaigning. And not that any one of them wins a campaign, but I think collectively you kind of have to do a little, you know, whether it's a standout going door to door on Twitter, you have to do a little of everything to have the complete package and hopefully hit as many people as you can. Because
absolutely.
It's not like yesteryear when you just put an ad in the paper, radio, or TV and knock on doors. Now, I mean, there's so much more you have to do to keep up with different generations too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, what'd you think about the ballot questions? We'll start off first one, the right to repair. I know there's been a battle since I've been in there to get it passed. Did you know or think that was going to pass?
I did. I thought it was going to go the way that it did, and not just because of a really well done campaign, because both sides spent a lot of money and both sides had brilliant advertising. You know, when you look at the folks that were creating and crafting those messages, it was some of the best political consultants, best advertising firms in the nation that were doing that. And certainly on the side that did not prevail, what really came out and got across to folks across Massachusetts was that the big car companies were there for big money. And, you know, we're at a point now where folks aren't shocked by big money in politics.
Right.
The New York Times and Campaigns and Elections, a separate periodical, have both done deep studies that the average person is no longer, you know, oh my God, repulsed or whatever. They're more non-pulsed by big money in politics. They expect it. But when you're heard, gosh, this is Ford, this is Toyota, this is General Motors, who are spending the dough on the other side of this issue, it immediately became very difficult for that side to make the case that what they were doing was in the best interest of the electorate, you know?
Yeah.
And I would say, too, that there was a good employment on both sides, but the winning side much better for the law enforcement people that they brought forth to make the case for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I was in favor of it anyway. And I would tell people, you know, at the end of the day, look at who's paying at the bottom of the line, who's paying for the other side's message, the large car companies. And because it's a vested interest, I get that. But you want to have the right to go wherever you want without having to spend dealership money, you know. But you still can go there if you want. But yeah, I was glad that finally went through, and I thought, they both spent a lot of money to get the message across. Now, ranked choice voting. What's your take on that, and what do you think of the results?
Yeah, you know, a lot of my friends on the more liberal side of politics made the good argument that this would be a good thing that helps more folks get involved to be able to run. Yeah. My view of it was a little different, and perhaps I'm biased on this because we do a lot in Maine. And I'll say honestly in this space, in this interview, myself and a candidate that we represented, not this last cycle, but the cycle before, benefited greatly from ranked file voting. Had it not been for ranked, this
Yeah.
individual would not have gone to Congress. He would have lost. And I thought, wow, that's great. That benefits us. 2 years later, when we're running for
Well, the other.
re-election, it was the other view of it. We had a completely different view of it.
Yeah.
Obviously. And I've been able to see that, you know, it was complicated for folks to understand. Most
Absolutely.
people believe if there's a horse race between two folks, that's one thing. But if there's 5 folks in the race, whoever finishes first, second, third, fourth, fifth, that should be the order. In this particular instance, as you know, if it's a candidate who had not gotten 51%, it's
Right.
a runoff kind of a situation. And the votes, you know, from the folks who did poorly, you know, those votes are added across the board to the other players. It seems to be a little bit unfair in some instances. I think there's got to be a little bit of a fine tuning on this if it's ever to be brought back, and certainly it's got to be more explainable to the electorate that's out there. It's tough enough to get folks to vote as it is
Absolutely.
now.
Right.
Or add anything that might even be, in a perception sense, negative as to how why their vote weight counts or doesn't count. Gosh, I'd be pretty angry if I went out and voted for somebody and they came in first at 48% or
Right.
in a 5-way race, and my person doesn't get it because of how the votes then get cut up.
Yeah.
Those who, you know, came in after them.
I feel the same way as you. I understand the argument and I get it, but I don't know if it's just old school, but I kind of like that, you know, whoever gets the most wins.
Yeah.
And another thing that people didn't take into account, or they never put it out there, is that there would be some cities and towns that would have to buy brand new voting machines. And that can be up to $1 million depending how large of a municipality you are. And that's a big burden on a lot of communities.
Exactly, especially even smaller cities, hard hit cities. A greenfield sticks in my mind. I remember what their cost was going to be on this, for an example. Williamsburg. My goodness gracious, you hit it right on the head. The hill towns, you know, how do you pull this off? So that was another good reason to take a look at this and say, hey, wait a second, until that could be addressed. It just really was, I think, for the average person, Gascaliju is, I voted for Joe Magadatz. They came in first. And my second choice was, you know, Virginia Smith. And my third choice was Bonnie Raitt. And gosh, more people had Bonnie Raitt as their second choice, and now she's elected.
Right.
So once that kind of got out to folks, that, wait a minute, that's what this is.
And especially when there's already a kind of a mistrust with voting or with some people, or I think the timing wasn't great either.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. But I thought they both came out probably where they should have, at least right now. And I was happy with that. Talking more about the state, what do you think about the future of the governor's race? Do you think he'll be staying around? And even if he does or doesn't, who do you see jumping in the race?
Interesting. You know, and I say this with no pro or con to Governor Baker, who's in a very difficult situation right now, dealing with the challenges of COVID. All of us, whether Democrat, Republican, have got to be wishing him well and hoping he'll do well. This has been extraordinary. And he was getting great marks on this effort until maybe the last 3 or 4 weeks. Where especially the rollout has not been great. If you look at where it stands in the rankings right now, it's hard to believe that a state noted for its incredible healthcare facilities.
Exactly.
And to that point, I just don't mean the BMCs and the Beth Israels, the kudos and the my goodness, the recognition right now that Trinity Health is getting. So that would be Mercy, obviously, in Springfield. The kudos that, my gosh, Bay State Medical Center is getting. The awards that they're winning.
They've done a phenomenal job keeping us updated every week as well.
Amazing. It really is amazing. I mean, you know, we often certainly should be thinking about the frontline heroes, the healthcare workers who deserve beyond our thanks, you know, but you take a Mark Kerouac at Bay State Medical, a Deb Rizzoli at Trinity Health, Dr. Roos at Trinity Health. Every day they're doing a COVID brief with Mayor Sarno. And, you know, not everybody, you know, has Mayor Sarno's energy level. I don't know what espresso he drinks. I got to find out. But to see them as a team, certainly it's not just to the benefit of Springfield. They speak about the region. And they've done a great and grand job. It's astonishing, frankly, what they've been able to do. But to come back to your question, forgive me for rambling a bit.
That's right.
His numbers have fallen off a bit right now. Folks are not satisfied or happy with the rollout, with what seems to be an inequity between Eastern Mass and Western Mass. Just again, as we talked about in the beginning of the show, you and so many colleagues saying, hey, Governor, don't forget us out here. So thinking about that governor's race, COVID, I think, is going to have an impact on this next one. There's been rumors that the governor would like to run for another term, an unusual third term. I think maybe a year or two ago, that could have been easy enough to do. He's got a large political action committee. His own war chest is big. But something I've taken note of, and again, maybe just being a political wonk, he hasn't raised any real money for the last 4 months. Who has is Lieutenant Governor Polito. She's still raising money. It's obvious that she'd like to be governor if he stands aside. Certainly Maura Healey. We've seen a big uptick in her political activity. She doing so many fundraisers in the last cycle for legislators, Zoom fundraisers, doing events now in Western Massachusetts for mayors who are up for re-election. So here's Maura Healey. It's advertised as an hour for Mayor so-and-so. And the amazing thing, she's hanging around for another 30 and 40 minutes afterwards in contact with these activists and these owners for different folks. Smart to do. So I think we're going to see Healey probably enter into the gubernatorial contest in 2022. Certainly Polito will seek it for the Republicans.
Think any dark horses out there or anybody like that we're not talking about?
Yeah, you know, there's the Harvard professor, and I'm embarrassed her name just went right out of my mind, who's already announced. Very cerebral, very intelligent young lady looking at this. I think you'll see a few folks in that vein. But you know, if Healey and Polito come into this with large war chest, it's difficult for another player to really play. Would be interesting for us in Western Massachusetts. Is it possible for Maura Healey to look to Western Massachusetts, to a legislator, to a mayor, as a running mate? Does someone emerge in the lieutenant governor's race in a different kind of a way? It's always a knockdown out, you know, in Democratic politics as to who's running for lieutenant governor. And very rare is the front runner the person that we see in the final, you know?
Exactly.
What works much better is when a gubernatorial candidate and have a relationship with the number two and start running as a ticket early. That works. Yeah. For both sides, we've seen that work. Whether it was Weld Salucci or whether it was, you know, certainly Baker Polito.
That's going to definitely be interesting too, whether Governor Baker decides 2 is enough and he moves on, or if he does run and gets challenged, or like I said, if he does leave, you know, obviously we think Lieutenant Governor Polito would run, and even if it's just Lieutenant Governor Polito and Attorney General Maura Healey, I think that would be a heck of a race, and I think it would be a tough battle. I mean, you have 2 powerful women, 2 strong women, 2 women that really identify with a lot of people throughout the Commonwealth too, and have, you know, I love our Attorney General, but to credit to Lieutenant Governor, she works both sides of the aisle. She understands being a former selectman, former state rep. She understands having to, as does Governor Baker, but they understand that you want to be successful, you have to work with everybody.
If it's those 2, the energy of that campaign, because the energy these 2 women have got, you know, Maura Healey has got a national footprint. She's known nationally and recognized as a major player amongst all the other agencies, the lawsuits, the things that she's gotten involved in. But both, their energy level is astonishing. I've seen Lieutenant Governor Polito in Western Massachusetts at 5 a.m. do one event at the swearing in of Nick Cochi, our sheriff, right? I remember what time in the morning we did that, 8 o'clock or whatever, right? What time do you need to get up if you live in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, in Western Mass for an event at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know? And we've seen the same with Maura Healey. The energy level, this would be a good governor's race. You'd have significant differences between the 2 candidates. And as I say there again, too, let's really watch that one to see who the lieutenant governor players may be. Certainly, too, as we speak of this, if the AG is running for governor, it opens up the attorney general's seat. And exactly. Those can be battles. And I date myself, but I go back to the days of the Francis Bilotti as attorney general. AG is powerful, from Bilotti to Healey. Each one has. Shannon O'Brien made it. I'm sorry, she was treasurer for us, certainly for Massachusetts. But each one of them has really put an imprint on that seat.
Oh, absolutely. Now, not to belabor this race too much, but do you think any problem, because being the attorney general hasn't fared well for people running for the next
Good for
seat,
you.
as you know. So I'm wondering how you think, or is it just happened to be that way, or do you think it is something to that?
I got to tell you, I love that, Brian, because I think in the ether of my sleep-deprived brain right now, it's been a long November to January for us, and in
Yeah.
the espresso slog of my brain, I think that's what I was trying to, when I was mentioned Bilotti, that's what I was thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't say it, and you picked up on it, I think. Attorney generals don't become governors all that often, you know?
Right.
In this instance, perhaps, though, Healy seems to have a base in the Democratic Party that's strong. What she can't afford is what we're seeing a lot of, though, in Massachusetts right now. To the liberal base, is she liberal enough? I think so. To the middle, is she middle enough? I kind of think so. You know, to the business community, does she play? We watch right now to see the massive impact that the greater Boston business community will have in this mayoral race in Boston, right?
Right.
Like in New York, I've never seen business community so out there in these races. It matters who's their mayor. It
Absolutely.
matters governor. And I think you're going to see a lot of money expended in that regard too. So for Healy, can she unite the factions of Massachusetts politics? You know, when you look at Western Mass, there's a Bernie crowd, and then there's an alt-left Bernie crowd as well.
Yeah.
And of course, there were the folks that were Hillary in 2016, and certainly with Joe Biden in 2020 in an amazing way. Joe Biden spent no money to clean everybody's clock in Massachusetts.
I know.
Produced there, that says something to whoever is running for governor. Because that was a lot of Democrats saying, I'm going to do what might be a little bit more common sense here. I love Bernie, and I was with Bernie the last time. I'm voting for Joe, though, this time around.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll shift over to the federal, and then I know your time is limited as well. So we'll kind of just do a few federal things, talk about that. But for the transition, I figure we talk about a little bit just quickly about my good friend Marty Walsh, Mayor Walsh. I was so happy and proud of him for not only when he first got elected as mayor as the underdog, but then to get the appointment as the Secretary of Labor. I was so, and for the people that don't know him, he just is a genuine guy. He really cares about the people and the work that he does. So I'm thrilled, and I think it's a good pick. Your take on all of that?
I got to tell you, I was elated by this. There had been rumored early on for a lot of Boston media. I had to play careful with this because I kind of had an idea that it might be happening. But you never want to prognosticate for sure. We also knew that he had to vet, and we knew that he would vet in all the right issues. And then there was the big issue, which he himself personally. I got to tell you, one of the most inspiring things about Marty Walsh is what he has done in the sobriety community. Always to explain to folks, this is the problem that I had as a labor, as a worker, as a union guy, you know, and I overcame it. And every day I've got to fight this fight. There's an aspect of that, to have a person like that as the Secretary of Labor who knows what these challenges are. I always admired him for that. The other thing that he vet on amazingly well, Boston is tough, as we know, tough politics, and where he did well, especially in the view of Kamala Harris and a few others, was and how far he had moved Boston on racial issues, on equity issues. And certainly they're not where they should be. A lot of people would say at this point, there's a lot of issues, but it's amazing that it was Marty Walsh of all people that has addressed, put commissions in place, done things to try to make Boston and greater Boston a more equitable place. Him being there as Secretary of Labor, and again, I don't say this one to pander to you. I know he's a dear personally. I think Senator Vilas knows him well. I think Representative Kupalo. That is good for us. And even bigger, the relationship that he's got with Chairman Neal. So you got the chairman, you've got the chairman, you've got the Secretary of Commerce being from Massachusetts. And forgive me, I don't mean to ramble, but to touch on a few others. To have the Massachusetts DOT chief, right? Our Secretary of Transportation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The deputy chief of transportation for the United States. So there she goes, Sharon Pollard. Gosh golly gee whiz, Quentin Palfrey over at Commerce now. To have Raimondo of Rhode Island, a neighbor, you know, move on into the cabinet as well. To have the Secretary of Education be from Connecticut, you know, Cardona. And then there's the big one. There's Senator Kerry.
Absolutely,
really unique new role. This,
Right. Talk about reinventing all the time.
again, too, I got to tell you there, Brian, what espresso are they drinking? What vitamin? John's got to be closer, I think, to 80 than 70.
He looks great still, though, but you're right.
Could run a circle around me. I mean, the energy level is just amazing, you know? But all these ties to Massachusetts, I think that is something that is good for us. I'm hearing it even right now. That, go for an example, the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, is Arizona. There are a lot of Native American tribal issues in Massachusetts that have gone unanswered, unlooked at for decades and decades. Yeah. These are individuals that can reach out to her and say, hey, my goodness, we've got a Native American ancestral site in Northampton. DOT wants to put a roundabout on it. What are we going to do? That's how it changed. That's how local it reaches up to federal, without a doubt.
Right.
And you've already touched on it well, and not to, to have Chairman Neal as the chairman of Ways and Means, to have Congressman McGovern right where he is, on his committee, and to have number 2 in the United States Congress, Clark from Massachusetts. It just reminds me of the days of Tip O'Neill and we had these powerhouses and what that meant. Brian, too, even locally for us, right? The day when you had a Speaker of the House from Holyoke, Hartley,
right,
and President Donahue. Look what got done. Exit 15, it should be named for one of those 2 guys. It never would have happened in a million years, right? And then maybe more recent for us, too, on the legislative level, always remember what power means. Once upon a time, there used to be a majority leader in the Senate named Melconia. There used to be a minority leader named Lees. They were both there at the same time. Districts next to each other, each representing the city of Springfield. Look what came out of that. No new Hall of Fame without them. And I think we all blunt about it. That was going to Florida more than likely. That had not been prevention.
Thank God. I mean, that's phenomenal having that here, as it should be. And who knows? I mean, appointments come up. Maybe we'll have the, maybe Joe Wagner will be our leader out here again. You never know with the appointment, but he's already in a high leadership position, which is great for Western Mass, and he's well respected. With our new speaker, Speaker Mariano, who again, obviously just got just became speaker, but he's very he knows the Western Mass delegation very well, and I'm confident he's going to continue where Speaker DeLeo left off, as being out here when he can again, and just being helping out where he's been fantastic with me in the past, but helping out where we need the help in Western Mass and listening to us. So I'm looking forward to that very much. Let's just finish up presidential election. As crazy as it was, I mean, you couldn't write a movie like this with COVID going on, with probably the most polarized president, well, in our lifetime, absolutely. And then having the amount of people come out and vote. What'd you think about the whole thing? And then, I want to talk about this a little more, the fake news and what people believe and don't believe and where they're getting their information. So just first, what you think about the election and how it went. And
if there wasn't so much sensational stuff surrounding the last 4 years for the administration of Donald Trump, if we weren't in a 24-second news cycle, never mind what once was a 24-hour news cycle that was tough to keep up with, I think there would be a lot of folks already really starting to take apart the election on a politically scientific level. It is stunning that Donald Trump got 74 million votes.
Yeah.
That would have been a record had it not been for the 80 million plus that Joe Biden got.
Right.
Good news is that folks came out to vote en masse. The
Absolutely.
News in my business, as we break down places like Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, where a lot of things that should have changed have not changed. The impediments, the obstacles for folks to come out to vote are there in ways that are just shocking. And yet, Stacey Abrams, smart enough, sharp enough to know that, gosh, if I need 8 out of 10 votes, I better go find 14 out of 10. Because gosh, gee whiz, I got to get everybody there for the votes that are going to be discounted, that are going to be written off or whatever. Election fraud, it just didn't happen. Republican governors and Republican secretaries of state made that clear. the Department of Justice, and others. So cutting really down to
Right.
six, the amazing thing, a victory for the American people. Whether you voted for one or voted for the other, that turnout says a lot.
Yeah.
We know that the Trump vote in November would be different if the election were held after January 6th. That is
absolutely.
a huge loss of real Republicans, of independent voters, even Democrats who voted for President Trump for whatever reason.
Yep.
Of course, they would view it differently. We know this from polling now. So I guess my point on the campaign itself, it'll be a long time before the textbooks come out, and the boring textbooks, I hate to put it that way,
Right.
about how this got done. But how did it get done?
Yeah.
Democrats through the kitchen sink. From old school hands-on canvassing to finding ways to raise the money needed to overcome this significant amount of money on the other side. Remember that Donald Trump, going into September, had raised and spent $1 billion already. You know,
Right.
The Democrats, to overcome all that, that's a story all in and of itself. And I think the unique thing that I saw is that political consultants who in the past may not have liked each other on the Democratic side, who would not work with one. The Biden, the Biden people folks got along with the Bernie people. Cory Booker folks came in, Kamala Harris, all the Democratic players who normally vie for space, who fight for turf. Everybody put that aside. And it wasn't just to get a Democrat elected over Donald Trump. It was also because there was, I think, a feeling of patriotism from a lot of players. Regarding the situation that we're in right now with COVID, that there needed to be that change. On the Republican side, it was a much smaller group of folks. And as you saw, so many of the best Republican consultants in the United States joined the Lincoln Project or came out against Donald Trump. So I can go on that. I mean, there's books to be written to that. There's a lot that can be learned as to the future campaigns, not just presidential, but gubernatorial, and even down to the lowest level of politics. How to connect with folks, what to do and what not to do. The impact is long range, without a doubt.
Now, where do you see the Republican Party going now? Obviously, there's a big divide. You got your far right, some of the extremists, and then you've got your old school Republicans who want to keep their values of the Republican Party, but are getting pulled in this direction that President Trump and others like Congressman Green have really radicalized it, and I think it's damaged their party. What do you think? What do you think they do, or where do they go from here to get back so they have a shot?
It depends right now. It really does. It depends on the big players, the adults in the room.
And it seems like they're teetering now.
They are. You look at Mitch McConnell, who will weigh this out as to what's best for Mitch McConnell, what's best for Kentucky, what's best for his circle of, important businesses that are supportive of him or his friends, etc. And you can see him looking at this right now and saying, holy smokes, we're kind of off the rails here. I didn't answer the last question well enough because you had asked me about the fake news piece and what people are believing and all that. It's astonishing to see some of the folks that believe in QAnon. I mean, there are some people who would seem to be quite rational, quite sane, business owners, folks responsible for 30, 40 folks or 400 people getting a paycheck every week and believing this. I think that's as much of that being a wake-up call to the Republicans looking at what the salvation of party for the future. It's also something the Democrats have got to understand. You cannot have a rational argument. You're not going to change these folks' minds.
No.
They have been radicalized, It's not my view of it as a political insult. It's what we're hearing from psychologists. It's what we're hearing from law enforcement.
Yeah.
It is stunning that a real Republican, a conservative, would look at January 6th as anything other than what it was. It was an insurrection. It was sedition. It was an attempt to take over the United States government to put in place someone who had lost an election. That made no sense at all. To the average person. But to those folks that showed up there that day, it's a wake-up call. When you look at the deep reporting of this right now, and more so the reports that are coming from the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ, as new folks are taking the helm of national security, et cetera, the NSA, we're learning more and more and more that the folks that showed up on January 6th this wasn't Mary and George Jones from the
Right.
farm in Montana saying, gosh, golly, gee whiz, I'm upset. And I'm here, under my First Amendment rights to peacefully protest. These were white supremacists. These were some really bad
militia groups, things like
Exactly. So it, hopefully the reality facts, the factual aspect of all this is something that will make some sense to those folks that might have just moved over the aisle a little bit. But for those who have become radicalized and believe that this is good, that anti-Jewish, that pro-white supremacist, that the Nazi groups in America, usually I got to say this, whatever you believe, whatever side you're on, Republican, Democrat, normally I say, God bless you for being involved.
Right.
Conservative, liberal, whatever, that's America. But you probably pretty much know that you're not on the right side if the person on the left of you is an member of the American Nazi Party, or the person on the right of you is an anti-Jewish, zealot,
Yeah, that was probably the saddest part of, not just the insurrection and January 6th, but just that part of it. I'm all for the election process, listening to the sides, and if my candidate loses, of course I'm disappointed, but if it's a good, healthy debate,
Amen.
That's what it's all about. And we kind of got away from that. I want to talk a little bit about how, like, when we grew up, we had our news. There was CBS, NBC, ABC. You had your Walter Cronkites.
Sure.
They read the news to you, and they didn't give you their opinion. They just gave you the facts as they reported them. And then they might, at the end of a news segment, there might be an editorial. And they would explain it. This is our opinion, or my opinion. Here's what I think about the war over here. Here's what I think about that. And it changed under the Reagan administration. Now I can't remember the doctrine. There's a doctrine to keep fairness or to keep both sides when you're doing the news, and it was vetoed. And I'm just wondering, do you think that has had a negative impact just on us as a society?
It's a gigantic negative impact, gigantic. A little while back, I had the opportunity to sit in on a symposium with some major players. I think I got there because Joe Napolitan wasn't available or something. I jumped in 11th
Fairness
hour. Yeah,
sorry.
Exactly. Thank you. Actually, I was really was going to go with this piece, and we had a discussion on that with this group. But this group is an amazing panel, and it had KDK from the BBC. It was amazing because on the left you had Walter Isaacson, the noted historian, arguably the guy that started CNN with Ted Turner, and publisher of Time magazine, et cetera, et cetera. And then you had Tony Blankley, who had helped Roger Ailes to start Fox News, and who had been a writer for Reagan. So you got extreme right and you've got left. And everybody's going back and forth. It's a great discussion. And finally, I don't know if they just got tired of the two of them, or if it was just that they respected each other enough where one said to the other, stop, enough. Let's be honest with everybody in this audience. What we both do is we validate the opinions of those people that watch us. Blankley, I think, was the one that was open enough about it to say, what we do, what we're saying is not just entertainment, but we're looking to keep those Nielsen numbers, those rating numbers where we need to, so we get the advertising. This is a money-making opportunity.
Right.
That's not what we had when there was just ABC, CBS, NBC, nightly news. And it's unfortunate too, because a lot of this discourse has cast some doubt in some parts of the electorates on really legitimate news sources, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. We are lucky where we live. We have one of the oldest newspapers in America, the Republican.
Yeah.
The Republican was actually read. It was one of 6 newspapers that Abraham Lincoln read every day. I don't know how he got it every day, but it was one that he actually, I don't know if it came by teletype or the wires, but he would actually read the Republican. There was a time when the weight of the paper meant so much. And right now, locally, local news is so important. That's what I think scares me the most, Brian. In a lot of places that we are involved in around America, to see the local newspaper fold, to see a television station get larger conglomerate, and that new owner saying, we're not going to do local news anymore. Look at the hue and cry in the Berkshires when the cable systems there, and I won't hit them individually, but all of them, took off local television. For folks in Pittsfield, for folks in the North, that that Northampton bureau, that Franklin County bureau, right, of a WWLP. It makes a difference. That's your local news, you know?
Right.
To lose that because a cable giant said, we're not making any money on this. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's bad. That's really a bad thing. So this is a big, big deal. Where people are getting their news from. Too many people are getting their news, getting their information solely from the internet, from Facebook, from
Right.
Instagram. And what does that do? It allows people in my profession to do exactly what we've done for the last 20 years. We can make you think this, we can make you think that. Even though the cerebral is red, by the end of the day, I'm going to have you thinking it's purple, you know? That's what's going on. And forgive this long answer. There was a time when the Association of American Political Consultants, started by Joe Napolitan in Springfield, right?
Yeah.
Would literally throw a member out if they violated any of the 12 key rules as to how we do our business. There was a feeling that we should be regulated. Lobbyists are regulated.
Absolutely.
Doctors, lawyers, etc. Political consultants are not. And when you think that political consultants are now people like Roger Stone and Steve Bannon,
right,
that's a great change.
Yeah.
For me, when it goes back to what you mentioned on Reagan, I always remember the first time that I was watching CNN and saw Paul Bagaglia on Making Opinion. And I thought, wow, it's a political consultant making opinion like he's a news person. And though he recused himself saying, what I'm saying about candidate so-and-so and so-and-so, you know, I represent that person, or I represent the Democratic Party, whatever. So that shocked me the first time I saw it. When I saw Carville do it, when I saw David Plouffe do it. And certainly there's Democrats and Republicans, both sides.
Absolutely.
There was a day you couldn't do that. And even to this day, I'm careful with that. If we're in an interview and I'm asked about a candidate that we're representing, I'll either say, hit the question, I can't because I'm representing them. I'm not going to tell you the truth.
No, and that's the ethical thing to do. But as you mentioned earlier, unfortunately, we've shifted away. And I think what's lost, some people don't realize that, you know, if you watch CNN or Fox, if you watch it during the daytime, it is pretty much news. And it might be slanted a little, but not too much. I mean, I've watched Fox in the daytime and CNN, and they might report on different things, but they're giving you the news. But some people believe that the news is Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow, and that's not news. Those are opinions.
It's opinion. It's opinion, very much.
I'll never forget Bill O'Reilly. I saw him do an interview. I think it was Larry King. This is years ago, and obviously he was always, you know, attacking Obama, attacking all the Democrats. But he said, I don't think Obama's, you know, against our country. I don't think he's a Muslim. I don't think any of that. I think he really does care about America. You know, he has a different opinion about what he does, but I'm entertainment. I'm giving the people what they want, which is, it's true. And I appreciate him saying that, but sadly, so many people watching that believe they're fact and it's not, it's opinion. And sometimes it's glorified opinion because they're getting ratings and on both sides. I don't mean this, you know, a Fox or a CNN, I mean, MSNBC, any side. And then there's even the more radical, you know, the OAN and, you know, you get some more radicalized ones in it. It's tough when people are getting what they believe is news and it's not really.
Freedom of the press, freedom of speech, so important. But there are lines, perhaps especially now in this new social media time that we're in, where there should be some lines, should be some accountability, should be some legal guidelines as to what you can or cannot say. And perhaps it's simple as in a political ad, we have to at the end, you know, do the disclaimer, paid for by you know, Ed Markey, paid for by Eric Lesser, paid for by Representative Ash. Maybe there's got to be disclaimers just like on the side of a cigarette pack for some of those. And I really appreciate something you just did too. You gave the perfect mix of both Democrat and Republican. But spin, you know, you're right. Daytime, it's pretty much news, right up into the news hours still, and then it changes at night because it becomes entertainment. When you look at the kind of numbers that Rachel Maddow is getting, that Sean Hannity are getting,
the number, they make more money at that. And I don't know if you noticed, Fox, you know, they used to start at 8, now they moved to 7 o'clock, and I can't remember her name, but they pushed it back because that's their money. Their news has dropped off since Trump has left. But they know that's still a big portion, and it is too bad that so many people follow that as, you know, this is fact. This is what you know. It's got to be true. Sean Hannity said, or Rachel Maddow said, or Cuomo said, or whoever. You know, that's the tough part. And I hope we can eventually get back. I know it's and we can wrap up in a second. We've been going for a while, but I know it's controversial when Twitter and Facebook and some shut down Donald Trump, and then now and others they've shut down since. And I was torn at first, but I'm like, you know what? Somebody has to make a stance, and I don't care if it was a far left Democrat doing something. If you're giving insightful information, if you're giving information that really can impact people in a negative way or cause harm, somebody's got to do something. Somebody's got to, because I just think it would get worse and worse on both sides, the bombardment, and people would, I think we would have a civil war of some sorts, which we were close to.
You can incite such things. You can incite incredible ire on the left or on the right, because already those two sides are already very, very angry.
Right.
And then you've got an awful lot of folks out there in America that are working real hard, especially with COVID. You've got people working 2 and 3 jobs trying to make ends meet, and they're worried about the orthodontist bill. They're worried about, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage bill? And gosh, can we still pay for college? They're often very susceptible because of anger, because of frustration, because of fear, to be moved by the fear that often can be put forth from an alt-left, alt-right entity, and especially a media entity, because it's a little bit more legitimate. It's one thing to have a candidate espousing alt-left, alt-right, but when a news agency does so,
right,
it adds legitimacy, and it allows that individual to perhaps foster and fuel their own, racisms, their own proclivities, their own beliefs that may be radicalized on either side, left or right.
Absolutely.
What's the answer for that? What a lot of people don't realize is that those opportunities on those different media sources allow folks in my profession to watch for or to create algorithms. If you're watching Hannity, and I can take a look at other stats as we start to look into the profile of a voter. Let's say you're watching Hannity, and I happen to be able to find out, gosh, you're a member of the NRA, you drive a Ford F-150, goodness gracious, you subscribe to Log Cabin Life, yada, yada, or life. I now have an idea of what your mindset might be and how I might be able to move you, contribute to a campaign on the alt-right, and by that I mean financially, how I can get you up at a rally, how I can get you to register 30 people to vote. That's what's going on with some of this stuff. And hopefully people will realize there's the business side of it too.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that January 6th, I think a lot of people are understanding from January 6th when we saw big business bail out, stop of certain candidates who did certain members of Congress who did certain things on January 6th. When you see folks like the former founder or the founder of Home Depot, Langone, saying no more money, the impact, we're talking tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to one party. And that's just him, but it's also from his friends. When you take a look at the Koch brothers, now it's just the one brother, but to see them pull out and say, we're looking at this in a whole new way. And what can we do to address exactly the problem that you just said, Representative? Though they have benefited in those instances from media on the right, they're now taking it and saying, wait a minute, this went too far. January 6th scared the heck out of these folks. Government, an overthrow of government, that's bad for General Motors. That's bad for Home Depot. It should be patriotism, but it's business for those folks too.
Right. And I think you're right. And I think, of course, I never wanted that to happen, but you hope that maybe that was the horrible thing that had to happen, and kind of say, whoa, we're going in way too many wrong directions right now. We got to slow down, get our perspective back as Americans, who we are, start working more on our similarities. And as you know, too, most people are more towards the middle, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, most kind of one around there. And it's the fringes that are on the news, the fringes that are pushing this because they're more radical and it's more newsworthy than, something I might say, or, the Democrat or Republican who isn't far left or far right. So
right. Absolutely so.
Well, Tony, you've given me quite a long time here, and I really appreciate it. I always enjoy talking to you. I always enjoy, your knowledge and your depth of knowledge on so many different, not only political, but just the landscape of who we are as in Western Massachusetts, and throughout the nation. I really appreciate you you taking the time, and hopefully the people watching this thousands and thousands of people who watch this will appreciate it and pull in some good knowledge, because I think we covered quite a lot today. So
I appreciate it. This has been a good exercise for me, and it's been a great chance to speak with a friend about a lot of these things. So it's been comfortable and easy. I almost feel like I could have lit a cigar during this or something and chilled out a little more. But this actually
as soon as the camera stops, we'll light up the cigar.
There you go. I will say to you too, and again, I don't say it to pander, thank you for what you do, because it is hard, it is difficult. Just the back and forth to Boston that a greater Boston legislator doesn't have to do. You know, you and I know we're on Long Meadow TV, so
yeah.
You and Senator Lesser back and forth up and down that turnpike. I did it for years when I was an aide in the House.
Yeah.
I did it thereafter. I don't know how y'all do it all the time.
I always tell people that's the worst part about the job is the travel back and forth.
Yeah. But to have such a diverse district and to do so well in representing it, being out there fighting for folks, appreciate what you do very much so.
Thank you, Tony. Hang on one second. We'll wrap it up right here. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We appreciate it. And, of course, Tony Cignoli, I can't thank you enough for your insight, for what you do day in and day out, keeping us informed, whether we're watching you on our local news or I get a phone call or you send me an email giving me an update, which I always appreciate. So thank you so much. Hopefully people at home, you appreciate this episode, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Take care.